Everyone again. Okay, so yeah, good evening and good afternoon. Hi everyone. This is first session of Agile Minds Romania meetup for 2025. We're very happy to greet you, to see how you've been doing, talk about the holidays, how they went. They went fast, right? And what's the plan for this year? What's the evolving plan? How things have been going so far, and where you think you're heading? I was thinking today, reflecting on a few things that make our involvement in the agile space valuable, and thinking, well, how common sense are some of the things we talk about, or we do, or we practice, and considering maybe things like, if you don't know exactly everything about what you're going to do, how are you going to plan, right? That's one. And if nobody actually knows the full details, how are you going to make it if you're not collaborating, right? That's another thing. Third, if you don't know still how the results should look and what's the final outcome, how are you going to find out if you don't measure early steps of success, right? And let's not call this agile anymore. Let's call it common sense, right? Is that also dead? Welcome everyone. I would like to greet tonight our two speakers joining in from the Netherlands, I think. Yeah.
Switzerland.
Switzerland.
Switzerland. Oh, sorry
Switzerland.
guys.
Switzerland.
And it's actually a duo. It's Benji Husserberta. I think my pronunciation may be not correct, but
that was pretty good.
Yeah. Good, thank you, Benji. And Benjamin, he's a Scrum Master, working together for quite some time now with Lorenzo Santoro as a product owner, right?
Yeah, correct.
And they will be guiding us together through some practices of creating realistic timelines while unleashing the power of parallel universes. So here you go, guys. The stage is yours. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We appreciate this very interesting topic and very practical from what we've seen. And I hope everyone can enjoy it and also participate with questions and interaction as well. So thank you, guys. Take it from here.
So thanks for having us. Thanks, Manolo, for sharing the Miro link. I will also share the screen, but it's of course appreciated if you join the Miro. It makes a bit more interactive. If you zoom out on the right side, there is kind of a frame where I put some stickies where you can always put your questions if you have any. That said, if there's anything on your mind, you can also drop it in the chat in Zoom or just interrupt us. Some of us tend to get talking in a long while, and you might have to interrupt them when they're going on for too long. This is what you learn when you work with them for 10 plus years. I'm not naming anyone now. But in general, if it's so, like, if you feel like it, just stop us. If something is not clear, we're happy to dive deeper. Or worst case, we try to park the question and get back to you at the end of the session. So I learned you all are used to using Miro, so we're like, I see you're joining the board. That's awesome. Just it will be yours. It will stay there. You can keep the link. Maybe I can also share it again in the end, or we can put it with the recording. So there's no secrets on here. And I think you're also all aware of Zoom features like the breakout rooms, which we will be using occasionally. So I guess it's nothing new. Otherwise, if it's new to you, just know you don't have to do anything. You might just be moved through space and time into a smaller group and eventually get back. So just that we can have meaningful conversations with each other. All right, then moving on and maybe starting. I will not read through all that stuff. That's just the meetup description, but it had some nice picture of Lorenzo and an okay one from me. But maybe Lorenzo, why don't you tell the audience who you are, what you're doing?
Yes.
Hi everyone, I'm Lorenzo and I work in Hitachi Energy, which previously was ABB Hitachi, which previously was ABB. So still the same place, but we got through some transition, joint ventures and changes, but still the same place. I think I met Benji in 2014 or maybe even earlier, like now like a memory puzzle. And we have been basically together in each and every project since then. I basically have a software engineering background, so I'm a computer science engineer by, let's say, studies, and I joined the company as a software developer, and then basically I will not say moved up the rank, but I just changed several roles. I played the role of architect, then I was Scrum Master, even though Benji is far more successful in that, and eventually I landed product owner, let's say around 5, 6 years ago, and I've been collaborating in Benji, basically, as I was saying, every single project that we have been through in different roles. So sometimes I was the Scrum Master, then he was the Scrum Master, and I was the product owner. So basically, we've been together in work experience for quite a while now, and I hand over to you, Benji.
All right. So I think you mentioned most things. I do also have a software engineering background. So we both worked as developers at one point in time as well together. So we also understand a bit the pain of a developer, which I think helps us in our respective roles now, even though we're not day to day into code anymore. Um, yeah, what else to say? I'm a Scrum Master since roughly 5 years, and yeah, we've been through some projects together. We've seen some things, and really looking forward to sharing some experience with you here. So even though it says Scrum Master for me and Product Owner for Lorenzo, it's we're not really tied to a framework. It just happens to be kind of how we started out, but we diverge where needed. In the end, Lorenzo has to answer the stakeholders as a product owner, and he does whatever is needed to kind of get better, deliver more value, whether that's Scrum or Kanban or waterfall project management, etc. Doesn't matter. So just keep this in your mind. We're not necessarily against or pro one or the other thing, and mostly we're looking more at Kanban stuff these days, just because it happens to work better, and we get slapped on the head less often in our environment than we used to before. All right. We talked a lot already. So what I would like to do now is, before you get started, I'll bring you here and I will move you into breakout rooms. And there are 3 questions here to set the stage. And in your breakout room, what I'd like you to do is basically just discuss the question. You can do 1, 3, or all of them. This is up to you. And it's important that you have a discussion with each other. If it's okay, feel free to just take some notes on the stickies, but that is up to you in the end. So important is that you discuss these questions that are why do we need to create timelines in the first place? Maybe what methods or approaches, practices have you already used, or are you aware to create those timelines? And if you've tried them out, how well are they working for you, for your team, for your organization? And I would just say, let's spend 5 minutes. I will set up the Miro timer so you see a bit before we get you back. And basically just wish you a nice conversation. Any questions before I will open the rooms? That is a no, so please enjoy. And I'd ask our lovely co-host to maybe join a room on their own so you can jump in if you feel like it.
We will. Let's call dibs, guys. So which room do you want to go? Let's spread out. I
I
can
will
pick.
pick room 3, if that's okay.
Okay.
See you.
I'll go
I'll
for
go to
room
4.
one.
Hello, Tanya. Hi, Sasha. Hi, Sasha. Can you hear me? Hi. Okay, so I can see you typing in yeah on the chat, but off the microphone. Okay. So let's hope we get Tanya and Elisa in as well. It's the full setup for our room 3, the breakout. So we can maybe start working together. In the meantime, if that helps you, I can just go through the first question and see if we can chat a little bit about it or find some other way to communicate. If you're not using the mic, it's a bit more difficult, but we'll see what you can do. So why do we need to create timelines in the first place? What do you think, Sasha? Okay. It's a bit unfortunate to not be able to share microphone to speak directly. Okay, so the chat says I'll read the chat because this will stay on the recording and it's important to get a picture of what we're having here as discussion. If stakeholders need to know when something will be done, yeah, it is because stakeholders need to know when something is done, and yeah, that is right, and we'll always get that question. Is not something optional like okay, nobody cares when it will be done, just do your work, do your best effort possible. We'll always have deadlines or other business commitments or constraints related to calendar, like an event, I know it's Black Friday, or it's the campaign before Christmas, or it's something related to New Year's Eve, or yeah, it's a feature that needs to go out with 1st of January, right? So unless we know when it's going to happen, it might be as well less useful, or that might be a constraint. So yeah, you're saying right, like sales support, other things, we need to coordinate with them to have the release done. And because of that, we also need to speak about time, right? What is the right time for them to join into the release process? When do we need their help, right? Training, okay, you're mentioning in the chat. When do we synchronize to give them the right training to use the product? Okay, and what are the business commitments that we have made related to timelines, right? Maybe we need to stay inside of those as well. Okay, so that's the first question. Second one goes, what methods or approaches or practices are you using to create these timelines? So you might be currently using something in your projects, Sasha. If you can just type in, I will just read it to stay on the recording. Maybe it's I don't know, some single point estimation technique like time estimation for tasks, or maybe it's story points or t-shirt sizes. What is it that you're using right now? I mean, how you determine when things are going to be done? How do you estimate or assess the duration it takes to build something or release a portion of value with your team? Yes, used all three you're mentioning. So you've been using time estimation, you've been using story points as well, t-shirt sizes. What else? Have you tried the Monte Carlo approach with forecasting based on a probabilistic approach of when a number of things will be done? Experimented with it. Okay, very, very nice. So yeah, I think it's Benji and Lorenzo's topic for tonight. So we'll learn more about it. Thank you. And the third question then would be, how well are they working for you right now and your team and your organization, the techniques you're using? That's the tough.
Back already? Okay, welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back. And yeah, let's continue.
Maybe just very quickly a debrief. Would somebody like to share what was the highlight of your discussion, just in 2 or 3 sentences, not to go too deep?
Sure, I can volunteer. In a few sentences, we managed to cover only the first 2 questions. So we didn't manage to tackle the third one, unfortunately. But the main idea, so why do we need to create the timelines, was because we need to avoid the chaos. We need to set up the transparency, clarify what needs to be done, and of course, aligning time to market expectations with the stakeholders, while trying a bit to achieve that way of predictability. Because it creates, let's say, trust in the team and also in our commitment. So just to sum it up a bit, and as methods, we listed Scrum framework and collective brainstorming, and of course the PI planning, the cadence-based release planning. That's it.
Thanks for sharing, Bogdan. Anybody else? I think we have time for one more voice before we move on. If you feel like it, no need if you don't want to. All right, so maybe I can quickly go through the 3 questions, because why do we need to create timelines in the first place? We will, right after this, give you an idea why Lorenzo and I care about this. Also, depending on who you talk to in this whole agile space, people see this very critical, but I think there are good reasons, or in certain environments where it's good to be able to do this. And regarding the methods, like this is the whole session today about that we share a bit the method that actually worked for us. And I love that how well are they working for you is empty, because yeah, we struggled with that as well to answer it in the first part of our career, I would say. And hopefully you have, after this session, a new tool in your toolbox where you could say, well, this actually is working very, very well. That is our aim. So moving on, if you're on the Miro, just for the new joiners, you can choose to just watch my screen, or you can follow along on the Miro as well. And on the right side, you have space for questions if you want to ask them. Lorenzo already mentioned we work for Hitachi Energy, but he is good with talking to customers, so I'll let you do that frame.
Cool. It's so as you can guess, we are somewhat in the energy business. The hint is in the name, and we produce basically equipment that is used to monitor and let's say control, perform like the basic operation of protecting expensive equipments. So expensive means multiple Ferrari. This usually set the standard. So transformer generators, those stuff is expensive, and you want to make sure that they operate as nicely as possible. Most of this equipment is expected to live a very long and happy life. So it's not about a couple of years like a cell phone. We are talking about 50 years for some of the equipment. So you're really looking into making sure that your investment is safeguarded. So we basically have teams that are working on these embedded devices, so that they are boxes. Effectively, we nickname them box, which have like the possibility of monitor what is going on the basically electrical wire and prevent from ugly things to happen. So if the current that comes into your transformer, it's too high, so it's beyond the specification, maybe it will burn down, and you make sure that does not happen, and you open a switch. So somebody in the company once told me, at the end, it's all about opening and closing a switch. It's all about knowing when to do it because you don't want to leave a town in the dark. And basically, this is the business. Benji and I, we are mostly focused on the software part of this, which means that we often work on products that are software products that either work as engineering tools because all this complex equipment needs to be configured. They need to be engineered so that they can know which parameter, like what is the threshold over which they have to operate, and it gets more complex, or monitor substations. And we are often shipping stuff like actual equipment and product that needs to be ready. So we are in a business where usually you compete globally. So there is going to be a tender and somebody says, I want to build a substation, please come with offers. And there are several players that bid in. And if you win, according to some criteria, then you have usually to deliver, which means that you have to install it. And Benji put a container ship because we once had one of our biggest project that was for Ørsted, Hornsea, like several basically windmill in the middle of the North Sea. This map is very, very confusing because I always think that the dark part is land, but the dark part is actually the sea. Okay, and this was very, very big in UK, and basically we had to ship a lot of like devices in the middle of nowhere, so offshore, and basically having a roadmap means a lot to a lot of those peoples because it's contractually binding, and if you don't manage to do something in time, the ship will sail without you. So it means that that's very, very bad news. So this is why basically for us road mapping is everything that I've seen before. I could basically find myself in what everyone was contributing, creating transparency, trying to make sure that we can meet expectation and the likes. Plus the fact that it's really like in our business, it's really like meeting the deadline usually means honoring a contract or paying penalties for not honoring the contract. So it's usually there is seldom ways in between.
Maybe also to add, depending on the like customer, you might also not have access to your software after you shipped it, right? So it's not that easy to put updates there. Or we jokingly said, well, you might need a helicopter, right, to fly out here and bring your USB stick. So we're not in the modern software as a service cloud business where you could say maybe timelines are not that relevant. I'm not so sure about this either, but here, yeah, the ship will not wait, or it will be expensive to have it wait. So that's why one of the key drivers where we just need to know, can we deliver it
This
in this
means
time?
there's little to no space in missing deadlines, Benji, right? For your business.
Well, there is space, but I think it's expensive. But Lorenzo
Yeah,
knows more
I will
about this.
not make it, let's say, overly
Yeah.
dramatic, but we are not really in a domain where, let's say, where you can say, if we have 10 features, we release twice a week, and if we don't manage something, gets the next week, because there are strict process of homologation, so you might not be allowed to update the software once it's been certified. So if these 10 things that were promised, you really want these 10 things to be in because it can get really, really tricky otherwise. So this is where like stuff gets really cumbersome, and that's why we really focused a lot on trying to get the timeline or the roadmaps as good as possible, or be wrong as little as possible.
Or know as fast as possible. Yeah. Maybe the last thing, because Lorenzo, correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes we're also really building up the whole setup kind of locally, and then the customer comes, inspects it, and says, okay, this is good. And then we wrap it up, put it on a ship, and then it's kind of delivered as seen. So, and this is where you don't want to tell the customer, come on Friday, you know what, maybe come 1 week later, you know, maybe a bit later, right? So that will not at least look so nice. So what did we try? Or traditionally, well, you might have seen it, we still have these kind of Gantt charts with the projects. They're not necessarily bad. There are certain things, for example, we plan then these acceptance tests in, right? You know, when they happen, and you try to put everything before, but somehow software turns out to not really work that nicely that way. to put it mildly. So what was next is, okay, let's try ideal days, right? Because we can think in what is an ideal day, like 6 hours, 8 hours. Yeah, I think that really didn't work well either, right? And we ended up kind of thinking in, oh, like I think we ended up adding tasks with like 40 hours and placeholders, and we had the awesome looking burn downs that are like the perfect line. Didn't help to deliver. So I learned about planning poker and story points. So I think I am right now the reason that parts of the company still is using story points, which were an improvement to kind of thinking in hours. It just turns out we were still late all the time because like it still didn't help. So we were kind of, okay, still running late and people were tired of it. This is a depiction of the team sometimes after endless discussions of is it 3 points, is it 5 points, does it really matter? And this was a bit, I think, around 2017 to 2020, just before COVID. I think Lorenzo and I were like, well, this is somehow not working, and we were looking for some other option. I let you talk about really the problems with story points specifically that brought us to this conclusion, Lorenzo.
Yeah, one of the tricks of story points is that Benji and I pushed for it because at the time it sounded like an awesome idea. You know, it abstracts all in all the like who is doing the estimates. There are like a lot of nice points to it, and but eventually you will always run in somebody that is like, yeah, but one story points, how many hours it is. I think every company has one of these wizards that has a formula to convert story points to hours. And bottom line, don't get me wrong, whereas I clearly tell them, no, it does not work like this. I understand the point because the magic of story points is that you're asking somebody to estimate in something that basically is an absolute value, but then at the end you have to convert this absolute value in something that is a number of days because you have to create a roadmap, you have to create a timeline from somebody that we were this for the same reason we were discussing before. So when you have, you know, your user story, your bug or your epic that is 7 story points, there will be like the customer that is telling you, oh, it's very nice, but do I get it in time for my factory acceptance test? Because that is the things that matter to him. And then, of course, you can try to explain, yeah, because, you know, our velocity is 17 every 2 sprints and the FAT is in 1 month time. Therefore, yes, we will manage your bug. So, but bottom line, you end up estimating something because you would like to know when it's done. In a measure that has nothing to do with time, to try to then come back somehow with some formula to time. And to add insult to injury, it's not our clever idea. Somebody did it for us, but basically we once as well tried to measure how it does it look like on a scatter plot when you try to relate the story points to how long effectively something took. So as a basic a scatter plot, it's just basically an XY, and on the X here, basically horizontally, you have what the team agreed after the planning poker in estimating an item. So something maybe was a free story point, something was 1. And then on the Y axis, you measure for that item, bug, whatever that was, how long it actually took. And basically, we nicknamed this the random number generator because, as you can see, there are items that were estimated to be 8 story points that took, I don't know, 1 day or 12 days. And there are items that were estimated to be 5 story points that took 27 days or 19 days or the likes. And of course, when you show this to management, the answer is always the same. Get better at estimating, because that's, of course, the problem. Like, you should estimate better. That is clearly the problem of all of this.
So to make it dramatic, we looked at this chart and thought, well, there has to be a better way. I think it wasn't actually like this, but it sounds cool.
And if you wonder, I do not know, Benji, if you took one from our teams, but we had one for our teams and it looked exactly the same. And there is one guy that actually we met in Budapest that he started to actually, as a consultant, to just collect it and to publish it because he was like, maybe I will find one where this works okay, and is still on his quest to find one, and he did it. So it's not only us, apparently.
Let's put it like this. I've seen many of those from many teams in many companies, and they tend to look similar. And it's always either 5 or 8 where you have this huge spread because people are like, if it's an 8, no, I don't have to argue, right? So eventually you will give up. That's my experience. I don't know how it is for you if you're using them. Okay, but now we're here not to complain, but also to talk about maybe what else could we do. And I don't know if we named it already, but what we're using right now are Monte Carlo simulations, or in short, MCS. And MCS are a method to create what is called a probabilistic forecast. And we will get into this, what all of these things mean. But again, to repeat, if you have a question, just interrupt or drop a message in the chat or on my room. So it is based on the throughput of a team. And the pretty cool thing is it runs in literal seconds. And we not see it running in seconds, but we can show you or hopefully explain why it's so easy because it's basic math. And it will answer relevant questions. So relevant questions for a PO. So all of these things are kind of connected to things Lorenzo cares about as a PO, which is why I like it as a Scrum Master. PO happy, then I'm happy.
Yes, basically it helped to factor in the fact that it's a probabilistic forecasting, which means that comes associated with a likelihood, with a percentage. You can imagine how likely you are to be right and to be wrong. You can play with the number. I mean, there are the no screw up customer to which you will use very high likelihood because you want to give them a date. They might not be happy, but at least you try to hold this date. And then you know that there might be the situation where you can take a risk and you can be bold. So it factors in already a part of risk management and you know what you're going along with. It's based on throughput, which as basically as an engineer, it's nice because it's based on data. I mean, I like to say our data suggests this, so it's not something that is beyond a given point questionable, or it's the expert opinion of somebody which thinks somebody. It's purely based on data. It runs in second means that it's possible for me to continue to often run this simulator. So it's not like I need to get a team assembled in a room and spend 4 hours to get something, and imagine 3 days later something changes and I have to drag the same people and rediscuss the things again, and maybe I think no, I will just not do it because it takes too much time. By the fact that it's so blistering fast, you can just afford to just rerun it multiple times per day. I mean, we ran it, I think in the golden times, like I was playing around with it 20, 30 times a day because you can really run it in a matter of seconds with the help of some scripts. And it answered the 2 relevant questions that basically, if you're making a timeline, I think the 2 questions that usually you always face is how much can we get done till a given date, which basically means imagine you have a deadline, you know you have to finish till the 30th of January, and you can tell how many items do you manage till then, or you can turn it around and tell I have this amount of items, when they will be done, and consider that all of this answer comes with a probability attached to it. So you can always check basically how likely are these things to happen, and it basically comes all of this together. You can rerun it very often, and it's based on exactly the data from your own team.
All right, just tying into this, I don't know if this is known to everyone, so just a quick explanation about the probabilistic forecast. So we took this quote or definition, I think, from the Actionable Agile Metrics for Predictability book. At the bottom on the Miro, there is also some resources if you're interested in this. I can highly recommend it. to everyone who is interested in that topic and has a slight interest in math and statistics, I would say. There is another one. If you're not so into the math, then I can also give you another reference. But basically, a forecast is a calculation about the future completion of an item or items that includes a date range and the probability. So that's kind of the definition to an estimate, where usually we don't have a probability. We maybe not have a range. So I tried to come up with some examples. Like there is a 70% chance, that's the probability that it rains in the next 5 days. Maybe there's a 20% chance that it rains in the next 2 days, right? So the probability and the date range have changed. And this is, or maybe the second example, more relevant for software development. Maybe there is a 50% chance that it will be done in 21 days or less, which means there's a 50% chance that it will not be done in 21 days. So, and that's the important part, because we tend, when we give a forecast, we say, yeah, 21 days, like we manage in 3 weeks. If you hear this is one thing. If I tell you we manage in, like, maybe we manage in 3 weeks, or there's a 50% chance we manage in 3 weeks, I think you're having a different conversation. Maybe it's still okay. As Lorenzo said, sometimes you can take risks. To explain this a bit, I once heard this example is there's maybe a 20% chance that it rains on a day. Usually you maybe say, oh, that's a small chance. I take the risk. I don't bring my umbrella. I don't take rain gear, whatever. If it happens to be your wedding day, I think you will look at it a bit differently and make different preparations, right? So kind of this, you can use this to your advantage and then see, like, maybe it's okay. Like, again, with some customers, you might have a good working mode, and they're also okay to accept the risk, right? Maybe this is like we have a risk of getting a huge contract, and we just accept it that maybe there's a big chance that we fail, but we want to give it a try just for the sake of it. Like, why not? And yeah, this for project management, I think is, I don't know if it's a game changer, but it's really helping at least to make this transparent. And the last thing before I move on, if you estimate or predict based on averages, usually this means you have about the 50% chance. You just do not make this as transparent. So if you average out your velocity, however that looks like, story points, items, it usually means there's about the 50% chance that you make it. So, which again, if you would just add this to your estimates, I think you would have already then different conversations.
I think it's always very nice as well to mention that, it sounds like a joke, but being 50% right, you means that you flip a coin. So, like passing, like I think it's, the number is there and it's obvious once you think about it. But I always tell like to people like with the math and the likes, when we approach 50% chance and they start to tell, yeah, but it's still possible. It's like, yeah, sure. But considering that now we're flipping a coin. So it's like, would you like that we get this customer, yes or no, by flipping a coin? This is the likelihood of this thing happening, because, that's what statistic is about, and this is what probability is about. So I think it complements well what Benji was mentioning about raining on your wedding day, and always remembering that 50% is you flip coins.
Just go to Italy to get married, then you increase your chance. All right. We talked about throughput, so very roughly that MCS is based on it. So I just want to briefly explain. I also put the quote here, like the definition is coming from the Kanban guide. It's basically throughput is just the number of work items finished per unit of time. This means if you use user stories or bugs, for example, you can just measure how many of them do we finish per day, per week, per sprint, per, I don't know, quarter. Doesn't really matter. That's your unit of time. I would always propose measure the stories on a per day level, because that is helpful for Monte Carlo simulation. So this is what we will be running with today, but this is just how we like it. And there's some there is some impact if you change this, but you can chat me up on this if you're curious about it. So the thing is, assuming you're using work items of any kind, you already have a throughput. You might not know about it, but it is there, which is cool because then you tick all the boxes that, or all the prerequisites that you need to run Monte Carlo simulations. So congratulations to that. So you don't need to do anything special. It's just there. And you don't need to do any other estimation of any sort. And the cool thing, and now here we speak with our developer hats or the memories of that time, you don't need to have a meeting. You don't have to grab your people and say, I know you were hunting that bug somewhere, but now come have a meeting where we play some cards, because this is just a result of the daily work that you're doing, that you're closing sometimes more, sometimes fewer items. And this is just quickly how you can visualize the throughput. So you can see this is the throughput from the month of December, which means at least in Western Europe, people will not work over Christmas time. So there's a big gap here, but you can see on the 1st of December, we closed 2 items. Then 2nd and 3rd, there was nothing. Maybe that was a weekend. Then we had a day where we closed 4 things, 1 thing, and so on and so forth. Maybe then you have some slower days. Maybe people are off already or sick or at the dentist, or I don't know. Anything can happen, right? And this is just based on this, we will run a Monte Carlo simulation, which I think we will do right after this. So another thing that is cool about this is if you look at the past data, you can say, let's look at the last 30 days, or let's look at the last 60 days, and you would assume that they might look, or the next 30 or 60 days probably look similar, right? So we don't necessarily need to do any capacity planning anymore. I think with Lorenzo, we joke that the last time we saw one of those huge spreadsheets where everybody puts their absences and has to know when they're sick and when their kid is sick so they cannot come to work. We don't really need that anymore because it is captured in the throughput, because people will be off, people will be sick, especially if you look at maybe 60 or 90 days, that usually is covering all kinds of public holidays and school holidays and whatever else might keep your employees from working and hopefully doing more fun stuff with their family, or maybe being sick in bed, but kind of whatever life throws at you is then sort of represented in that data. So the cool thing is also, if you always take the last 30 days, tomorrow that number is different than today because we moved 1 day forward, right? So it is not a fancy AI thing, but it will still learn, because if you're getting faster, more efficient, or you're adding a team member, this will be automatically included. Yes, Bogdan.
Yeah, I had a question because I was thinking about what you guys said. So, for example, if you don't know, or if you don't plan, for example, with the holidays or things like that, and you run the simulation, and let's say, unfortunately, the simulation ends up on a date which is actually a holiday, because those are the most chances for all the items X to be done on that period. How will you guys know if it's actually the correct interval, or you just provide the interval, something like that?
I will still, what Benji says, it applies, I will say, like 90% plus of the cases, which means that if it's any random period of the year, I will just not bother. I take the longer time period that I try to forecast, the longer time period I will look back. So if I'm trying to forecast the next 2 weeks, I will look back 2 weeks. If I'm trying to forecast 3 months ahead, I will look back 3 months, something like this, basically. If I have to forecast July of a team that is located in Finland, where I know that nobody will be around, then of course I will be stupid to just completely ignore this thing altogether. So, it's, you have data, but you still have to apply a bit of context to this. So imagine if now we forecast based on December if I use December to forecast on January, I could say, look, this is coming in with some data, and most likely I'm gonna be able to squeeze a bit more because I know that for 5 days nobody was around. I will still trust the numbers, but in the back of my mind, I will keep most likely I can manage to squeeze a bit more. Okay. At the same time, if I'm looking at December and I'm planning based on the date of November, I will think in the back of my mind, yes, but I need to account for the fact that like 1 week people will just not be around. So it's, I mean, again, as I was saying, it works basically okay. You still have to apply a bit of brain power in general because if you work, for instance, like we do with Nordic countries that in summer they close shop and it's like away for like 5 weeks. There is no simulation that you can apply. You just have to know because it's this is just it, you know.
And it's also like, thanks for the question. I think it's often coming up. People like this is a tool, and you should really still use your brain, or you need people to make sense of this, right? And I would suggest don't try to over optimize the tool, but just apply common sense, to refer back to what Mihai said in the beginning. And it's like, yeah, think about this. Like there is still a place for project management in all this, where I'm usually dropping that to Lorenzo to figure everything out. But I think then it's easier to do this than to try to tweak the tool to kind of know all these kind of things. Also, maybe just some practical experience. Sometimes you just have only 2 weeks of data, right? And with Lorenzo, I think it was 1.5 years ago when we forecasted like a completion date for something where an external consulting company was also helping us. And I think they were telling they might be done earlier, and we were running the Monte Carlo simulation as well. And I think we were within a month of when it actually finished, with kind of 2 weeks of data, very unknown. And maybe we were just lucky there, but we tend to be lucky with all of these things, which tells me it might not just be luck anymore. But it's, of course, always depends a bit on what data do you have. Does your future look like your past? Because if you say you fired the whole team and hired new people, then yeah, most likely it's not the same. Okay.
For
Yeah,
sure.
this is one thing that crossed my mind. Sorry, Bogdan, that maybe the consistency of the team or the team formation is allowing them to keep the same team for a longer time. So these numbers are relevant still. It's not different guys in the team or fewer guys or more guys, because
Yep.
those then the throughputs would be affected.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the thing is also, even usually you add more people to the team, it will first maybe slow you down because somebody has to help. But the nice thing is it will learn, because next week we will see that impact. So it will slightly go down, and then it will automatically pick up when this new person knows all the things and can contribute. Sorry, Lorenzo.
No, I just add something because it's one thing that we wondered ourselves. So it's possible that somebody's wondering the same. How much stable should your team be to run these things? The answer is, well, it depends, because Benji and I, we were once on a project where we had for a healthy 1.5 year a lot of rotation. Okay, and once I got to discuss this topic basically with Vacanti from the book, and he enlightened me on the fact that if you had a lot of rotation in the last 1.5 year, why do you suddenly believe that your next 5 months will look dramatically different? So forecast with what you have, because it's basically it's not self-learning in a way that, you know, like AI, it's trained and all these things, but it adapts. You know, so if your last 1.5 year you have been losing a developer and ramping up another developer for the last 1.5 year, what brings you to believe that all of a sudden your next 5 years are gonna be total heaven and it's gonna be perfect and absolutely like no problem? So, you know, you don't have to, you know, wait for the perfect team setup to come along with no change and the likes to be able to forecast, because basically you just have to remember that what you forecast in the future will, up to a given point, resemble your past. So you can use it. It's very, very tolerant to a lot of these problems. as Benji said, and as Mihai said before, it's a bit of common sense. You have to understand it's a method, and then to apply and to understand what do you get to make sense, as Benji used to say, of the data. It's still something that you have to do. So it's important to understand what is underneath it.
Very valid points, guys. Thank you very much for the answers. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Now we're explaining how that whole magic thing actually works. So I hope you're ready. It includes very, very basic math, and I might need some random numbers from you. So let's think about how would we forecast how many items can we close in the next 14 days. So that's why we had the fancy title with the parallel universes, because Lorenzo tends to explain it like this. Assume you have 10,000 parallel universes where we have kind of all similar teams that work on exactly the same thing. And this is kind of our basic assumption. In each of this universe, we now want to simulate 14 days of work, because that's our question, right? How many items can we close in 14 days? And how we try to simulate 14 days of work is we look at our throughput and select a random day. So can you give me a random number between 1 and 31? Just shout it out.
7.
7. So we simulate 7 actually, because that's now our input data. Means we closed 2 items on this specific day. Now, imagine you just do this 13 more times because we want to simulate 14 days. So this is basically the whole math we're going to do. So it's really easy. And we just base it on the history. The reason why I ask between 1 and 31 is because our input data has the size of 31 entries. If we would look back 3 months, we would have from 1 to 90, right? So just to understand. So let's assume we did this 14 times. Sometimes we were lucky, we hit the 4. Other times we were hitting like a 24 and we closed 0 items. We would get the single number, which would be our simulated throughput, which I would just say maybe that was, what is realistic? Maybe 14 items. So we would have 14 items for our first parallel universe. And then we do this 9,999 times more, and we would kind of put all the results. So the first universe, we managed to close 14 items. In other universes, is that the correct grammar? Never mind. In other universes, we manage, maybe once we get super lucky, we always hit the 4 item day for some reason. So we close like 35 items. And in others, we get super unlucky and we often hit zeros on our throughput and we close maybe 3 items. And once you do this 10,000 times, you can visualize it, and then you can read off the probability. I don't want to go too detailed in the statistics here. I can refer to Lorenzo, and he's happy to talk about this for hours to days, I would guess, if you really want to know more about it. But basically, you can then see the distribution, and this usually looks like a normal distribution. Lorenzo, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm doing bad statistic stuff. So a normal distribution, and you can see 50% of our simulation said we would close 15 items or more, and this is kind of how we can derive the data. So does this on a very high level make sense to you? I know it's late on the first day, so all right. So basically, we just need some random numbers. We kind of read it from a chart like this. You can literally do it by hand with dice if you want to. But the cool thing is that is run like if you have a decent computer like this, so you can get a result right away. And that was what Lorenzo also mentioned. And maybe very brief, if you paid attention, you would see if our throughput would be exactly 1 every day. It doesn't matter what kind of random day we pick. So then you have perfect predictability, right? because you know you will every day close exactly one item. Very unlikely, or I would challenge your working practices with working on the weekends and so on. But this is kind of why in the whole Kanban community, we talk about flow, and we don't close anything for like almost 2 weeks, and at the end of the sprint you close everything in one day. Then you will see you have a lot of extremes in your forecast, and that will, like, I think, Lorenzo, we had forecasts that were saying there's a 50% chance we're done in 2 weeks, but 80% chance it takes 2 years. And it's like, it will not be that useful if you give this to someone, right? So you want the closer together the 50% and the 80%, for example, is, the more, I would say, accurate your forecast is. So that then it's usually more useful. I forgot what we had here. Oh, exactly. Anything to add? Yeah, anything to add from you, Lorenzo, here on this one?
Yeah, we once joke, and for like people trying to approach the Monte Carlo simulation, I found that the quote from the Avenger, like I think this was Infinity Endgame, no, Infinity. I don't know if it's Endgame or Infinity War, but basically there is this scene where Doctor Strange looks into the future and he says, "We fought this battle a gazillion time and only once we won." So you can say that realistically speaking, it's not very likely that you will deliver your project if in 14 million universe you only succeed once. So this is the joke, and to simplify the Monte Carlo simulation, I always tell the people, imagine that there is a gazillion of universe and you run this project in a gazillion of universe. If in all this universe, 90% of the time you deliver on time, I think you will be quite confident to tell, yes, we will deliver on time. If only 5% you manage, then most likely the roadmap or the timeline is not really suitable, or you're taking a lot of chances, which might be okay, but at least it's good that you know.
I mean, you might get lucky,
exactly,
but probably you won't. All right, just moving on because time is flying, I'm seeing. So I think I'll leave this one to you, Lorenzo.
Yes, basically we were already going through this before, and Monte Carlo simulation helps you with basically two questions. So how many items do you manage within a given time frame? And the kind of answers that you get is you don't get a number, because that's the difference that we are trying to make compared to a lot of other methods. What you get is something that varies according to the amount of risk that you are willing to take. So for instance, there is a 80% chance that we close 18 or more items in 2 weeks. Now you are willing to drop the level of confidence and say, I'm fine if I'm only right 50% of the cases. Most likely this will change in there is 50% chances that we close 30 items or more in the next 2 weeks. But keep in mind, whereas with 80% chance, you're basically right 8 times out of 10, with 50%, you're flipping a coin and you can be either right or wrong. Then, of course, it does not mean that being wrong means that you get 0 and, of the 30, but that you will not get the 30 plus that you could have gotten in the lucky side of the universe. At the same side, you can turn this around, and you can get, for instance, the when questions, that is, when a given amount of items will be done. So imagine that you have 25 items. You can check that, for instance, to finish these 25 items, there are 70% chance that you're done by 30 of January, or that you're done earlier. These answers to basically different kind of question. The how many usually can help you with sprint planning, or if you have PI planning, whereas the when usually, if you work in our environment, that, as I was trying to explain before, it usually comes with, let's say, a fixed number of features or epics that you want to deliver. So basically, you have more to tell when can you deliver something like this. This is more kind of the kind of aspect that you can be working on. I mean, even imagine if you're running a consulting company and you're running on a fixed price project where basically you're being asked by the company that hire you, we have this backlog to build, when you will be done and how much it will cost me. This is a very, very suitable way to end up giving you this answer, because you can tell when, you can map up the people that are working on it, and you can basically tell this is how long it's going to cost you to get this done with the likelihood that you are comfortable with.
But what if they don't want to hear that?
Oh, you tell them anyway.
So also, if you know how many items and when, you can combine it, and then it tells you there is exactly a 82% chance to finish 18 items by 30th of January or something like this. So because we will get to this now, because we can quickly talk about how this could look like. So for example, if you want to do forecasts for a team, it could look like this. You can say, okay, I know I have like 35 items left, and my target date is the 30th of January. So it's actually 2 weeks from now. So if you started your sprint today, this might be your team, or it could be your team. So you know when will 35 items be done, and you have different probabilities, right? So maybe on 24th, if you're like to live dangerously or risky. More on the safe side, maybe it's end of January, right? You can also say how many items will I get done till this target date. So you see the same. It's like the higher your probability, the kind of lower the number. So I hope that makes sense. And if you combine it, you also get for 35 items till 30th of January, there is an 82.37% chance. So if somebody likes precise numbers, that's your thing, that you can tell them exactly. And the cool thing, I think we get to this, but these numbers change all the time, because tomorrow you have 1 day less. Maybe you have 1 or 3 or 5 items less that you have to do. And this is kind of the continuous forecasting then, that you can say, there is a trend. You shouldn't overreact to the trend. But if it goes from 82 to 78 to 75 to 68 to 60, you should do something about that and not just kind of take it. So, but we'll talk about this. Just for the sake of time, like we actually in the process wrote different tools and scripts. So we also put it in the resources. They're like open source tools, so you can use them, different level of kind of details you can read. But for example, we have one that just works with CSV files, that you can just put in your numbers from whatever you're using. If you still have a physical board, you just have to track it and you can run it. And it tells you how many items will get done till a certain day. So just to show you how this could look like, because you will not do it by hand, but there are many tools out there, and some of them we have experience with. So even like individual features, when will they be done? But I don't want to spend too much time on this and actually activate you a little bit. I would say we can do this here. There are 2 questions. How often do you re-estimate anything if you're doing any kind of re-estimations? And how do you re-estimate? Like, are you having a meeting with your team? Are you kind of cutting story points in half if you feel like you're halfway through? Maybe, I don't know, would somebody like to share? Might be easier than writing it down here. Is anyone using story points in their organization at the moment? Just curious about this. Oh, I see a thumbs up. So I know I can just speak from my experience. I think I only ever estimated before we even started working on something, and then you never look at this again, right? Which means we're betting a lot that this initial plan really holds up. And I'm not really sure why we're not re-estimating, but I guess it's quite costly. So if Lorenzo wearing his PO hat, if he can choose between let the people work and focus on delivering value, or getting them into a room to discuss how much is actually left of this thing? I think he will pick the first, if possible. So I think as project manager, he might just try to figure out or do the re-estimate on his own, but we're not really doing that, at least in my experience. And this is the game changer. So I let that to you, Lorenzo, I think.
Yeah, basically it's really like a simple math. I mean, for somebody that sees it the first time, usually like people expect that it's complex enough that you don't fully understand it, but it feels magic and you can trust it. In reality, the first time that I come along with it, it was like I was telling Benji, this is simple enough that we can actually try to write our own things. And when Benji was telling we wrote it, it meant that Benji wrote it, and I told him what I would like because here is truth to be told. And really, a computer like can run it in second. I mean, in reality, we have seen folks running this in Excel to say like, not that I will do it, but it is possible. Okay, and it's very very fast. And by the fact that you can run it so easily, you can play so many what if scenarios that is really really amazing. You know, it's you can really start bending even what you can do. Imagine that you get both ends that are fixed, because sometimes I end up in this scenario where you get to be, I mean, you got told you have to deliver exactly this scope in this amount of time, and nobody cares about, about realistically. You can check how much throughput improvements you will need to carry out in order to get there. Because this sometimes is a different way for people to think. Because, imagine if you are able to tell somebody, you want me to deliver this in this amount of time and you don't want to listen anything. Okay, but we made the math, and we will need a team that can deliver twice as much what we can deliver today. Maybe this means adding one person, because you are super short on one critical path, but maybe this means adding 10 people. So it's really so easy that you can continuously recast it, reforecast, that it allows really for a lot of scenario playing. You can really start to think like, what if we do something like this? What if we do something like that? Where would we end? What if we start to bring in this more work? It's really, really, I mean, the freedom that being able to play with the number gives you really allows you to go wild and to really recalculate your forecast every day. So we used to have, for instance, reporting where we have to report on time, and eventually we were saying we just take the likelihood. If it's more than 80%, it's green. If it's in between 60 and 80, it's yellow, and if it's below, it's red. And I don't even have to think about what is the actual, things, because these are the plain numbers. So it's really amazing once you get to be able to run these things whenever you want in 1 minute.
And I think here, just to add, I think we're getting on the final stretches of what we prepared. I think what we haven't mentioned is this is really the input for you as a PO, most likely that, well, it looks like we will not manage. And instead of just accepting this, we have several options, right? We can think of what could we simplify? Maybe we still manage the target date. Maybe it's early enough to approach a customer and talk with them about, does it have to be this date or can it move? Because if somebody asks me like 2 months in advance, that might be doable. Maybe we just pick the date for no good reason. It just seemed likely or good. If you tell me like 3 days before you were supposed to deliver, I think I will not be that happy. So this is also about, I think we had it with we have dedicated product managers also next to the POs, and be really, I think you gain their trust even if you approach them with, we will not manage, but at least they trust you because they learned we will tell the truth, right? And they also learn that, okay, we're not that far off as well. But what usually people don't like is I think this watermelon metrics, right? Outside everything is green, inside it's red, and everybody kind of knows it, but nobody dares to tell. And this creates transparency, which is not always comfortable and forces you to do something. And I think also Lorenzo and me usually will discuss what we're seeing here. We think about, is it now a problem already? Because again, if it drops from 82 to 78%, that is just variation you have, like maybe just somebody's off or whatever. That's not a reason to worry. But if you see a trend, I think you should start to act. And this can be many different ways, of course, and can be a very good input for retrospective, for example. All right. So it sounds too easy, Lorenzo, because
Yes,
usually it's really this, you have to do less, you get more accurate forecasts. Developers love it because they don't have to deal with magic numbers somehow, and they don't get distracted and they can focus on other stuff. It does sound wrong, which I get. I think we were skeptic maybe in the beginning as well, but it really does work. And just we do a bit of self-advertisement. We did some case studies also where we checked back the data, or we try to occasionally really do it. It's like whatever it's predicted, was it happening? And I think last week we kind of randomly did it without checking before, but we were showing the number someone, and Lorenzo picked, was the date we predicted we will manage 32 items till that date. And I think we managed
43.
30 or, okay, yeah. So very close. You just have to be aware. It doesn't tell you which item you finish, right?
That's
So
on
if
you.
you work on the wrong stuff, and that's why predictability is not something you are, it's also something you do. Like this Monte Carlo simulations, it works, but you can do certain things to make it more accurate, right? So this is also like working in small chunks, what I mentioned before, like having items that have a lower cycle time so that you can start and finish in a shorter amount of time instead of bulking everything up, like filling up a sprint in the beginning and finishing everything in the end. This is counterproductive for predictability as used with Monte Carlo simulations, right? But in general, it is quite simple to run it. So I would really encourage you all to try it out. Like there are many tools, like you don't have to use the ones we created, but I would really encourage you to try it out. And even the cool thing is you can do this and you don't have to tell anyone, right? You can just run it for a sprint, like in parallel to your sprint planning if you're doing that, and just see how many items does the forecast predict and how many will actually be done. And maybe that helps also to make a case for this kind of work. Apart from, like, we're obviously very biased because we've been doing this now for years, and we have yet to see something better. But yeah, that's kind of our, oh no, we have more slides. Sorry, I forgot about that. I thought we're wrapping up now. So just for the sake of time, I will run through this. I don't know if you have developers in here, but the cool thing is, as Steve Ballmer here was saying, it's all about the developers in one way, less distraction, more focus on value-adding work. No need to come up with estimates. Like as a developer, usually they don't really like it because they also think like, oh, they're being kind of held super accountable to this, even though they were just randomly asked, oh, do you think we will be done by March or whatever? And I think there is this quote, everything will be doable in 60 days, right? Because we always think it will be doable. We don't think about all the other stuff. And one thing is there's no confusion about what a story point really is. If you have 30 seconds, we have this one person, he joined the team with Lorenzo and me he was kind of more of a commissioning engineer, I think, before, and it was his first role really in a software team. And he was working as a QA engineer tester, and he never heard what a story point is before, and we never used it. And then he switched the teams, and they had a refinement session with story points, and he was just chatting us up, and it's like, I don't know what's going on here. What does this even mean? Why are like we're
What
laughing now,
numbers
but
that everyone is saying?
he was genuinely confused, and it didn't make any sense to him at all because he was not. I think if you've been in the environments like this, you just accepted that this thing exists. But for someone from the outside, he was like, "What is going on? I really cannot follow or understand." So that can be a nice thing. Okay. almost done. So to wrap up, I'll leave it to Lorenzo.
Yeah, the first one, it's something that it's actually meant as a joke, okay? Because once we were pitching this story internally to somebody that was quite high in the food chain and he was very financially oriented. And I was like, look, how many of your projects are on time? I think not so many, right? So even if I'm just as bad as any other method, at least we are cheap because you don't have to bother people. So it's now, again, it's meant as a joke, but consider all the time saving for the fact that you don't have to bother developers while asking random things, and they can use the time for all the continuous improvement that they never find the time for. So even if it's just equally good or bad than anything else that you're using, it's for sure cheaper to implement. It's a lot easier to plan basically anything that you can come up with. As Benji was saying, like, this is something that we always say, keep in mind that if you get 15 items done 80% of the times in 2 weeks or less, it does not mean that this item that your customer wants will be done. Making sure that the right items are worked upon and the likes is still your job. So this helps you, but it does not replace you. So it's the whole trick with the artificial intelligence. I think it can help, but not replace still people yet. So it's very accurate. It's very fast, but again, making sure to lead the team towards the right items. If you work with a product owner, make sure that the 15 items that you get done 80% of the time are the one that he or she wants. It's still relevant because they don't magically get done. It's usually easy to communicate with the stakeholder because they end up trusting, because you really come up with something that if you work with reasonable people and they spend a bit of time with you, you can explain how the things are coming up. So this is always what I try to tell. It's like, if hard pressed, I can explain to people how we did come up with a number. I mean, even 95% of the times, you are 5% wrong. So, it's not like you will always win because you use this one. Even a probability, even 80% means that there are 20 times out of 100 where you're wrong. Okay. So, but at least it's professionally explainable. How did you come up with something? And the continuous forecasting makes it extremely actionable. So if something goes bad, like COVID time, 2 people out of 5 gets COVID and they're off for a while, then you can really see, okay, how much did we actually lose? Now it looks like we only manage, I don't know, 10 items instead of 14. Which are the items that you are not gonna do? So it's extremely actionable. Or can you put it and say, to get these items done, we need 1 week more? Can we talk the customer into giving 1 week more? So it's very, very actionable. And again, consider that it's so actionable without having to basically bother the developer. So it's cheap while being very actionable.
All right. I tried to wrap it up here, but it's basically all the things you already heard. So I would like to just jump to, there's a bit more, and I thought we have plenty of time to do this. Yeah, my forecast wasn't that well, apparently, and I did not reforecast while we were running it. Sorry for that. But I would still like to give you 5 minutes, maybe in small groups, to reflect a bit what you heard, and you probably heard a lot. So sorry for that. I hope it was understandable. So just maybe discuss together a bit for 5 minutes. Think about what maybe were insights and learnings, or what questions do you have, and maybe we can manage to answer all of them here, but we can do them on the Miro board in a bit as well, or like later on this week if you have some questions. So, or the coolest thing is, what would you like to try out next week? Just make a 15% solution. Think about what is a small thing to try this maybe. And with that, I will just give you some time in the breakouts unless somebody stops me in the next 5 seconds.
Let's go.
All right. Have fun and yeah, enjoy the conversation.
We keep the same rooms, right, guys? I'm jumping in one.
up to you.
Yeah, we can keep the same.
Ai, ce bine!
Ok, da, unde mă plimb eu se plimbă și înregistrarea, de asta vă spunem mereu recording in progress, scuze de... Eu aveam niște întrebări pentru ei, dar n-am vrut să-i întrerup acum pe final. Poate, uite, generăm niște întrebări împreună și le scriem un pic pe bordul ăsta pe care îl avem la dispoziție. Ce ziceți de metoda asta de a face forecasting sau estimări? Insights, learnings,
Da.
ce s-a legat?
Aș vrea să mai studiez un pic pentru că mi se pare foarte high level și foarte nesigur.
Este neintuitivă, pentru că practic
Da,
nu mai estimezi niciun work item, te bazezi doar pe un istoric de
exact. Nu,
viteză de lucru și simulezi acel istoric de viteză de lucru ca și cum ai ști și despre work item-urile
Da.
următoare cam cât durează, bazându-te de fapt pe faptul că vor dura cam la fel de mult ca cele din trecut.
cam așa.
Simulând de multe ori cu partea asta probabilistică, cu clopotul ăla al lui Gauss, te poziționezi unde vrei tu în funcție de confortul pe care vrei să-l ai ca acuratețe. Dacă vrei să fii sigur, te duci spre
Un
partea
istoric.
din dreapta clopotului unde toate eșantioanele sunt de desubt. Dacă îți permiți un pic de risc, te duci mai spre vârful clopului, pe acolo, 50-60%, zici, am putea să încercăm chiar pe aici să-l finalizăm. Dar e neintuitiv, adică cum să nu mai stai de vorbă cu nimeni, să nu mai întrebi pe nimeni cât durează, cum facem,
Da.
pur și simplu să ai tăria să te încrezi în istoric. Deci,
Da.
dacă a mers în trecut, o să meargă și acum. Deci e un pic challenging asta și nu știu cum să o sumarizăm aici, dar să le punem în engleză să rămână și pe bord pentru ei. Dare to trust the numbers. Nu știu, pentru mine asta ar fi. Adică să am încredere în statistică și în numere, dincolo de faptul că
Da.
nu înțeleg fiecare work item încă sau n-am discutat despre estimarea lui. Eu asta aș pune din partea mea, adică nu știu dacă sunteți de acord să...
El a zis că până la urmă trebuie puțin modelat pentru că nu trebuie și un pic de
Da,
cadență.
adaptat contextului și
Da,
au
exact,
asta.
exact.
Și dacă îl vedeți că
Da,
deviază, întrebați-vă
da,
ce se întâmplă și săriți acolo,
da,
nu lăsați
da,
așa.
da, da.
Da. Și aici la questions eu aș mai fi întrebat how to answer concerns about different sizes of the work items.
Asta.
Adică unele sunt mici, unele sunt mari. Dacă runda trecută am avut doar de la mici și acum urmează doar de la mari. Că doar mi le numeri cu trupul,
Exact,
doar îmi
exact,
spui câte au fost, dar nu spui de care au fost.
exact.
Tot pe statistică probabil trebuie să mă bazez, dar sunt sigur că
Probabilitatea va fi mult mai jos. Mult mai
Da,
rapid.
nu, culmea e că funcționează, statistica e la
Da.
fel, pentru că rulăm pe un set de date suficient de mare, probabil că din probabilitățile alea se acoperă și cazurile astea, că unele sunt mici, unele sunt mari. Dar e la fel greu de crezut că se va întâmpla, știi, până nu vezi. Și sunt sigur că cineva îi întreabă, știi, oamenii îi întreabă. Și aș pune asta, how to answer concerns about work items sizes being different. Și vă las pe voi să mai generați și voi că...
Aș avea și eu un concern. Până la urmă, bineînțeles că uitându-ne în urmă și avansând, am înțeles că se schimbă probabilitatea și răspunsul la întrebarea când va fi mereu altul în fiecare zi. Cum oferă acest lucru confort și siguranță că odată comunicată rămâne și peste o săptămână aceeași.
Da. Da. Mă tem să-ți răspund eu.
Da, nu, doar să
Intuiesc
întrebăm.
răspunsul.
Da.
Da. Mai avem un minut, 55 de secunde. Scrie tu întrebarea, dacă
Da,
poți.
da, acum mulțumesc.
Aici și poate, uite, și Alina vrea să adauge ceva. Poate, uite, la ultima întrebare. What do you want to try next week? Adică îți propui să cauți mai mult despre metoda asta, să citești mai mult despre asta, sau să o folosești, să o pui în practică cu echipa.
Da, clar, prefer să mă documentez mai mult și să înțeleg mai mult. Dar ce am înțeles eu e că până la urmă există un risc, adică în tot există un risc, gen
absolut
roll dice, exact,
Oricum ai face forecasting, nu o să ai 100% probabilitate.
exact, Exact.
De estimare corectă. Da, da.
Da.
Foarte bun. Ăsta este un insight pe galben acolo. There's always a chance we miss the date. Da? Asta e, poate îl scrii tu sau vrei să te ajut?
Poate puțin ajutor.
Da, da.
Welcome back.
I think we're back.
Yes, you are. I hope we did not lose anyone in the breakout rooms. Nobody joined earlier, so everybody used the full 60 seconds to end the discussion, which I think is a good sign, unless you just complained about the session. But I think you're all smiling, so that's not so bad. I saw there are some questions there. Before this, because we're basically hitting our time box, I first would just like to thank all of you. I know it's even later in Romania, or most of you, I think, are joining from than in Switzerland today. So thanks for spending your evening with us. Lorenzo and me are really passionate about this, not because we have to sell you something, just because we saw what we could really change with this, right? And make the life better of the developers, but also really deliver more, focus more on what's valuable. I think that's what drives us, and it's a bit puzzling why not everybody is doing this already. So we try to share this as good as possible. If you have further questions, feel free to also ping us. I think I can also put maybe the LinkedIn profiles here on the Miro board if you want to do that. So just please don't hesitate.
Great idea. Yeah, we'd appreciate it, Benji and Lorenzo, and we can stay connected. Ask more about your study cases, which we admire. You took the time to create and to explain in more detail how you're using this. Also curious about to see what you're actually using. Maybe when we connect, you can share more about your tools as well.
Yep.
And there was interest, at least in the room I've joined for the closing session, to study more about, because it seems like, this sounds too good to be true. Like you said it earlier. It's like, I don't need to do estimate. I don't need to know anything about it. I just have to trust the numbers. So would that work?
Yeah, it's also good to be skeptical, and I think it's important to maybe try it out, but also double check, and that's what we try to do occasionally, to really check back and is it actually working? Because we're so much assuming it always works. I think we tend to forget about it. I down here in this frame also put, like, we tend to write blog posts and they tend to be lengthy. So if you look at them, don't be scared, but we try to give a lot of context also what we're doing. We looked at how can you use these things in your Scrum events, for example. I think there was a question about this as well, how we can do it for feature planning. Also our case studies and just a general introduction into how Monte Carlo simulations work, with some spreadsheets where you can kind of play along, more detailed explanation, which I recommend everybody to try this once to understand it.
Yeah, I think some of the question could be answered if we are short on time by basically some of the links. About trusting the numbers, it's I saw somebody there to trust the numbers in general. I think you can check the case study, which we have done, which basically it's a post-mortem project where we check what we forecasted and what actually happened and the like. So this should help you build a bit of trust. This comes along as well with I think the learning a bit. This is what we were telling before, and Benji was let's say stating that you are not predictable, you do predictability. So there is a lot of understanding of there are things that you can do to make sure that the numbers that you get out of the Monte Carlo simulation are closer to the number that you then deliver. And these are actionable things that you can and should do. So the Monte Carlo simulation is only one part of the story, but there is more. Okay, and I think, let's say, seeing the big picture help as well, getting a better experience out of it. So, Americans used to say, your mileage might vary. So it's, I think you can stick to the saying. And the amazing thing is that once you start to see a bit the big picture with some of the Kanban flow metrics and the likes, there are very nice things that you can do that benefits the team in general that help you to get more consistent results, which basically it's a let's say virtuous circle that just gets the team better and better. Can we take some of the question? Or
Yeah, maybe I just want to say we have more like linked our tools here, and I know because we're now 3 minutes over time, Lorenzo and I can and will stay a bit more and maybe answer some more questions. But just if you have to drop off if dinner is ready and getting cold, then we understand that that is more important than listening to us, especially because we're being recorded. But just anyway, if you have to drop off, thanks a lot, and I think we can now look into some of the questions if you want.
I can start with how to trust continuously changing deadlines. What do you mean, whoever wrote this, what does it mean, continuously changing deadlines?
Thank you, Lorenzo, for picking my question firstly. Just to be short, and we understood, and it's clear that each day passes by and we look back to another period of interval of time. Of course, we will have changing results and changing responses to what we are looking for. So if I have a stakeholder and I will communicate to him, to her, that's today the deadline estimated is with a probability of X is, I don't know, 15th of February. And after 1 week, we meet again, and the date will not be 15th of February, will be, I don't know, 28th of February. Doesn't this put a question mark on
Yeah.
I can try to answer, or do you
understand.
want to, Lorenzo? But
Sorry?
I could try to answer, or do you want to give
Go
it?
ahead. Maybe you will become a PO one day. Go.
Yeah, maybe not, but
I
you just correct me if I'm wrong. It's my
Yeah, I don't think there is
certification.
right or wrong. I can only say what I do.
I just don't want to get
Yeah.
to
No, I understand
No,
that.
no,
I
to
understand
get
your
because
further
point.
question on estimates.
the thing is, what I would say, or what came into my mind, just because these things changes doesn't mean you have to relay all these changes to your stakeholders, right? Because they're interested, I would assume, will we make that date? And if it's 85% chance we make it, or 78, it probably still means, yeah, we're pretty confident that we manage. I think where you have to take action is if you're like, oh, there's a 30% chance, right, to have this discussion, but they might not need to know so much in detail. Or otherwise, like usually we have more people don't need to know when it's done, but it's more a question of can we hit that date? So that's often the question we have to answer. And then like like people are smart and they also understand probabilities as well. And we can explain them like, okay, this is just for your transparency, right? Don't panic if it goes down. But this is also showing it a bit. But that I think would be how I would have answered. And I'm looking for Lorenzo for validation whether this was correct.
It's all good. I mean, operationally, I usually have, let's say, a dead zone. So there is this amount of fluctuation for which I will not blink. So I feel myself as kind of like the rubber that is in between the stakeholders and the team. So fluctuation is normal. And I mean, the fact that I know does not mean that everything needs to be communicated because, you're right. I will not go around and say, oh, today it looks like we deliver in 1 month. Tomorrow it looks like we deliver in 1 month plus 6 days. The day after it's like, oh, no, no, no. Now we made it back. Now it's 28 days. So what I was telling before, these are data. Making sure that we use the data to our advantage is a skill on its own. So it's I will say like put yourself some, if you use this one and you see that the deadline is moving a bit, like try to stay cool, make sense of the data, and decide. we are running like close, I can still move to the next release, or it can get, or it can be dismissed altogether because it was something that was, you know, opportunistic. If we manage, if not, not. So you can play with the data and say, do I still manage my fixed part? Yes. Then I'm still relaxed because only the, let's say, this part that where I have a bit of play could go out. Okay, so there is a lot of art, if you want, in this things. I will absolutely suggest, you know, if you've seen Interstellar, there is this quote from the guy. We say like 100% honesty is not the right amount for human beings. So have a dead zone where you say there is an amount where I will keep it for myself and I know I can work with the team before going out and communicating to stakeholders, because otherwise it really feels like we are, in Italian we will say like you are flags in the wind. So it's just like you're floating in one way and then it's on the other side. So that's how you build even the trust on people, because you can show that you can be very accurate. And when you are saying there is smoke, therefore there is fire, you say it with conscious, but you refrain from just jumping on, we're making it, we're not making it, we're making it, we're not making it. That for sure does not help.
And I think also, just to add to this, I think once you get nervous, you might also ping me and we look a bit at the data and we might consider what could we do without panicking as well. But then you can start to make plans and you can say, okay, let's check how this continues for the next 2 days, but we start thinking about what could be done without, again, I think it's also giving some space and trust to the team and not kind of daily, like, I looked at the data. What were you doing yesterday? Were you not working? Were you watching TV all day, or something like this? So maybe then that is also good. Like you can start thinking about what to do without having to execute it yet.
So there is also always an opportunity, Benji, to use good old collaboration, right? To figure out this situation.
Yes.
So let's get back to the common sense. What happens when
Exactly.
things go bad? We work on them together to make them fit again. Okay, or we adapt to it as we go. But to Catalina's question, I really admire that this method is actually showing you the deviation early.
Yeah.
While with story points, as you said, how often do we re-estimate? Probably just at the end of the sprint, right? When we have to put the work back into the product backlog or to assign it to a new sprint. But with this, the advantage is that you have reassessing the date and the probability every day. You get a trend of going into the wrong direction early, right? So you can maybe collaborate earlier to save the day or do something different about it. So.
And still, like I think it's a bit of a danger because you see that every day you might overreact or react too quickly.
Okay.
So that's also maybe
there is
something.
a learning.
Yeah.
There is a learning curve.
Yeah.
For that. Yes.
I love this question here. What's the impact when you introduce a new item into the sprint? Because I cannot answer it, but Monte Carlo simulation can. So basically, we're not really using sprints, but what Lorenzo sometimes does is we seem to be faster than we expected. So what if we were to add this other thing? Will we still make our target date, right? And you can, again, it runs in seconds. So that's when Lorenzo just runs the 30 simulations a day, because we have tools that connect directly to our backlog, right? And then he can literally play with it and see what would that mean. And
I mean, as a example, we use tags for items that go in a release. And if, for instance, it appears that we are going to be finished before the deadline, what I will just do is like, let me pick the next items on the line that are important. I tag them in and I just run the simulation to see, okay, now it's too much. Let me remove a couple of them. Run it again. Okay, now it fits. So what's the impact when you introduce an item into the sprint? It's I don't know, you recalculate and you find out. I mean, because it's really as simple as that. You know, you can go, let's say, more philosophical and say, look, instead of using, you know, capacity and velocity, you could forecast how many items are there gonna be done in the next weeks, which I think it's what Anup used to do because Anup works with us. So I think this is how Anup used Monte Carlo and the Scrum. I'm not a Scrum fan, so I will need to be forced to use sprints. Basically, then you can decide if the numbers tell you, I don't know, 10 items, 80%, do you plan 10 items? Or do you plan maybe 8 so that you have some extra headroom if something unplanned comes in? You see, there is a lot of, it gives you a lot of freedom, but basically what's the impact is like, well, it depends. You might be able to completely swallow it because you are in the 10 items or more. You are in one of the sunshine, let's say, universe. Or it might be that this sprint is not one of your best, and tough luck, it does not work well, and Monte Carlo simulation will tell you that adding an item, not a good idea, most likely.
I think there was this idea, like Anup, right? You used this, or at least talked about it once, that, okay, 95%, right? This is all sprint goal related items, and between 95 and 80 or 75%, maybe there are like 3 or 4 items that might be then non-sprint goal related items. So which you could, if it comes to it, just scratch off. Like, so this is also maybe ties a bit, how does it apply to Scrum? Like, this would be one way you could use it. And as Manolo would for sure tell you, you should always have sprint goals if you're using Scrum. Did this answer the question to whoever asked it, and if this person is still here? Otherwise, we're just optimistic and say yes.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much
Okay.
for the answers.
Thanks for the question. How to answer concerns about work item sizes being different?
Can we go with an example?
I wanted to ask Anup how he would answer it, just that we include him a bit, but I don't know. You can also do it.
No.
I know, Anup, because it's late. Maybe you appreciate a bit of activity. Otherwise, let me know.
You're waking me up actually in between. So, when it comes to the same discussion we had in our breakout room as well, when it comes to work item size. So, how at least I can say this is a learning for me. So how do we work? So we look at one metrics called the work item age. That's where we normally do it. So we fix this is the maximum day we will go with this work item, and if it is crosses this days, we color it differently. I'm just doing exactly what we do, and the team is supposed to split the item into multiple things, a meaningful one, or we will say that pair program together, people together, and please try to complete there. So we try to keep the sizes. We don't look at size, but actually how much day it will complete. They will have initially some idea that, okay, this will complete in maybe 5 days or 6 days. And if it crosses the days which we have planned, then the things what I mentioned happens in the team. But it crosses sometimes. Okay.
I'm so proud of you.
Sometimes crosses. I don't have the control sometimes. My question sometimes, yeah.
I want to take like a fast story because this is interesting. So the whole Monte Carlo simulation and other stuff are based on the basically Little's law, and which basically relates throughput, average cycle time, and the work item in progress. And Benji is very, very good in explaining those things. But one of the nice stories about this is that basically, imagine that you have a cellar and that you're drinking wine. This tells you that if you can basically correlate how many bottles of wine you have in your cellar and how long they will stay in your cellar based on how many you drink them. Okay, because it's the throughput, so how many you drink, throughput, and how many they are in the cellar. And the amazing part of this is that this is irrelevant if it's a 750 milliliter, a 375, or a 1.5 liters. So this is a funny story to tell that beyond a given point, the item size is not relevant. because once you close a night, because basically this will have an impact on your throughput. Because imagine if you have a lot of big items, it's likely that your throughput will be something that is like very scattered. It will be very, let's say, not really reliable. You will not be closing an item every day. If you work on items that takes 2 days, I mean, I start something today, I know that, okay, Saturday, but then it's like, I know that on Monday will be closed, and on Monday, Wednesday will be closed. And if I have a team with few people, I will be closing a bit of items every day. So my throughput will be basically like quite flattened and the likes. Bottom line, item size has an impact on how reliable you're going to be. So the more you manage to have items that are similarly sized and smaller in size, the better, of course, it will be. But the fact you don't have does not prevent you from running Monte Carlo simulation, which is a very important and interesting fact.
Very powerful example. And at this time, I'm really starting to think to pour myself a glass of wine. The good thing with wine is as it ages, it gets better.
Yeah, there
Work
it does not.
items, if they age. Yeah. But very nice. Thanks.
There is this sticker from ProKanban. I'm looking at it because it's on my laptop. It says, if you can't drink it, don't let it age. So it applies to wine and whiskey, I think, but well, maybe not milk, but that's another topic. Okay. Maybe looking at, was this addressing also the complexity of the tasks or not really? Maybe just looking into the phases.
I think they are quite related.
Yep. Because maybe just in a nutshell, if you want to do predictability, you want to slice your work as small as possible, which should reduce the complexity, and then you get a bit like right-sized items is usually the word we use. It's not same, doesn't have to be the same, but it's kind of not larger than this. That was what Anup was referring to, that we try to set this as a target.
Which goes basically, I think it transitions very smoothly in how much time do you actually invest in product backlog refinement, even though you're not sizing the items. Actually, I will challenge that we are not estimating the items, but we are aggressively trying to size them. Is just that, which is not maybe part of this presentation, we are not sizing them in, let's say, we are sizing them in time. So usually one of the things that you try to do, especially if you're on Kanban, is that you will have something that is a service level expectation, which means that every item that flows into your system should be done in X amount of days or less. So before pulling in the items, we are not really wondering too much about many things, but usually you have one simple question to the team. Do you think we can manage this item in 7 days or less, if 7 days is our service level expectation? If not, then we will try to break this up. We will try to make it in smaller pieces. We will try to take actions to make sure that when the item is started, it does not stay in the system too long. And that's why I was hooked by the answer from Benji, because we are doing something that is basically what it's nicknamed like as right sizing. So again, it's not like you are trying to make sure that all the items have the same size, but you try to make sure that the items have a digestible size. So something that can go through your system soon enough. Benji?
No, I'm just, as we speak, I will add more blog posts because we kind of had the questions before and we were writing about it. So we had this. Oh, yeah, it's even a nice screenshot. Yeah, that's good. So we were writing a bit also about how we went from running refinement sessions every week with the whole team to trying to do something different to, I think what we prefer now is the team does it on their own, because they understand if somebody looks at this and says, this is a small thing, this is doable in 2 or 3 days, nobody else needs to be involved necessarily. And if they feel like, oh, this is tight for this 7-day deadline or cap that we want, then we might have a follow-up discussion with whomever is needed. And the nice thing here is it's about time. So if it is, oh, I cannot do this in 7 days, but maybe if I grab Lorenzo and the two of us can do it in 5 days, that's good enough, right? And then the refinement might include who is needed to work on this or how can we speed this up. Like usually my first question would be, can we split it up in multiple items? But there are other ways because customer doesn't care if I worked alone on it or me and Lorenzo worked on it, but we want to care about once we start something, how fast can we deliver it, whatever that means in your system, like to get it to done. And this is really powerful because it's not talking that much about what can you do, but more how can we get this done. And maybe especially in the beginning, if you're starting with this, you start having interesting questions about, I don't know, who tests these things and I cannot do that, right? Or whatever. And you might manage to break down some silos. Or Anup, I was very proud today because in the other team, there are 6 items queued up and waiting for verification, and Praveen is not around. Can somebody else take care of them? It made me proud when I saw the message. So it's kind of all triggered by all this focus on getting things done. I diverged a bit from the original question. Sorry for that, but I just wanted to highlight it. And it's even recorded, so you can tell him that we talked highly about them. Did it answer the question as well?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you guys
Awesome.
for the answers.
Awesome.
Makes total sense. And I like the fact that you mentioned the SLA, because I was thinking, what are the guys using as a reference to ask the developers if it's less than something? But the SLA, it's a really good one. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And this is also, if you don't have one, I would suggest looking at the data, and also you could use this to improve like initially. So don't set unrealistic goals if right now it takes you 80% of the time, like 25 days to get something done. Don't say, oh, I was in this meetup and Lorenzo said 7 days, so that's what we should be using, right? Because depending on your environment, maybe 24 days, 25 days is perfectly fine, and you don't need to optimize when it's not needed. At the same time, if you run 2-week sprints and it's more than 14 days, you kind of have a problem.
It's a hint, yeah. That's you're giving me so many assists today. How does this apply to Scrum? You see, it applies to Scrum that when we were running Scrum and doing story points, one of the most horrible things ever were spillovers. And spillovers, of course, just to make sure everyone is on the same page with the term, is when you start something in one sprint, you don't finish, and it spills over to the next sprints. Then you will have these ferocious fights on how do you account that, because my, let's say, brutal approach is I give you 0 story points for that, because if I had a commitment, we didn't meet it. So it's not like we achieve 3.5 of something that we didn't do. That is 0. Okay, and Benji already said a lot. Imagine that, how does this apply to Scrum? Well, transparently, because you can use it for planning how many items in the sprint. So you replaced your capacity and your velocity with an easygoing Monte Carlo simulation. You don't have to do story points anymore. Bear in mind, you can still do story points to discuss whether everything is on the same page about the complexity of one item. You know, it's something similar to right sizing. If I ask Benji, can we manage in 7 days or less? And he tells me yes. And in my mind, this thing takes 20 days. There is a mismatch that is worth discussing. So you can still work around all of this, but the point of Scrum still stays absolutely valid. So you can basically retrofit this methodology, if you want, in Scrum to do the basically the planning of the sprints, and for you know, like replace, for instance, the story points poker for this, let's say, creating a common understanding. You can use, for instance, this service level expectation as another basically baseline point to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So for me, it blends basically quite transparently. It's just, instead of using something, you can just basically shift to something else.
One additional benefit maybe that I can add, let's assume I ended up in this one parallel universe where I have the evil Lorenzo PO that is kind of trying to push more stuff into the sprint. With enough force applied, estimates will be changed and whatever, we tell you what you want to hear, right? If you run math, it will give you a result, and the result is the same with these numbers. And then, Lorenzo can say, F this, I still want to do it, but basically he knows the risk because there's a probability. So it's a lot easier to argue. We actually internally have some teams that run safe and they started, or at least some teams then started using this because I don't know if you're in a safe environment, there is this confidence vote at the end where everybody always says free because we're not really trusting it, but we don't really want to say anything about it before, in front of 100 people. That was our experience, at least. It's hard to argue with a result from a simulation that is based on data. And it's not, Manolo said it will not work. It is just based on the data, this will not work. Now we can close our eyes and ignore this, but then don't come after we didn't manage a random date and complain, right? Then I think it helps kind of also with maybe a bit of psychological safety in a way, or if there is no safety, which is another problem, but it's, yes, sometimes we maybe are just simply too optimistic as well. So it might not even be the evil Lorenzo that is pushing us, but maybe we feel like we really would like to get this in. And then if you have the numbers from the simulation, at least you can also discuss about it because, hey, we said we manage these 10 items. The simulation says there's only 50% chance. So maybe should we try anyway? Why do we think we would manage this? But it gives you just more data to work on. But in the end, you as a team should still make a decision. But I think this is where maybe a use case which can come in handy.
Mind if I step in a bit? It's incredibly engaging, and everybody's asking questions that you guys are doing a terrific job answering all of them. But I'm also minding the time as we're half an hour over the proposed time zone, and I know you've been kind to say, well, if you need to leave, feel free to. But still, we have to close. I'm running out of hard disk space for the recording. I'm just kidding, but it was amazing. Thank you guys again. Thank you for sharing all the resources, getting into what if scenarios and what happens when I do this or I use it like that. We hope to get you into our community more often, not just as speakers, maybe also as participants when we have a nice topic that interests you. And thanks for bringing all that enthusiasm about new forecasting techniques that you use, and making us aware that common sense is still alive. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for all the questions. And keep them coming. We try to be answering them also later on.
Thanks.